Exeter Planning Board, I'm declaring that an emergency exists, and I'm invoking the provisions of RSA 91-A:2, 3, parenthesis B, close parenthesis. Federal, state, and local officials have determined that gatherings of 10 or more people pose a substantial risk to our community in its continuing efforts to combat the spread of COVID-19. In concurring with their determination, I also find that this meeting is imperative to be continued to the continued operation of town government and services, which are vital to public safety and confidence during this emergency. As such, this meeting will be conducted without a quorum of this body physically present in the same location. At this time, I'd also like to welcome members of the public addressing this meeting remotely. Even though this meeting is being conducted in a unique manner under the unusual circumstances, the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. Also, I'd like to welcome all of the consultants and engineers and attorneys. I've got a full house tonight. Let's start the meeting by taking roll call attendance. When each member states their name, also please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting. So I'm going to go do roll call with our alternates as well. I'm Langdon Plummer, and I'm chair of the Exeter Planning Board, and no one is with me in this particular room. To my left, Nancy.
Nancy Belanger, alternate, and I'm in the room alone.
Okay, I'm looking down through here. John Gruder. Can you turn your microphone on, John? And try it again.
Yeah, sorry. John Gruder, I am in my room alone.
Okay. Pete Steckler?
Hi, this is Pete Steckler. I am currently alone.
Jen Martell.
Jen Martell, present, and I am in my office alone.
Aaron Brown.
Aaron Brown, present in my office alone.
Gwen English.
Gwen English, I am alone in the room at the moment.
Pete Cameron.
Hi, Pete Cameron. I am alone at the moment.
And Molly Cowan.
Hey everybody, I'm the select board rep and I'm also alone.
Thank you. Also like to introduce our town planner, Dave Sharples, who is with us this evening.
Thank you. I am here, as you noted, and I am alone.
Thank you, Dave. Okay. First order of business is we have minutes to approve of July 9th, 2020. Which was our last meeting. So are there any comments to be made? If none, I'd entertain a motion to approve as presented.
Also move.
Thank you, Pete. And who seconds?
I will second, Mr. Chair. It's Gwen.
Gwen seconds. Any discussion? I will have to do a roll call vote, so I will ask John, you're first on the list.
I wasn't at the meeting, so I'll abstain.
Thank you. Jen?
Approve.
And Aaron?
Yes.
Gwen?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Molly?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Minutes stand approved as presented. Thank you. Dave, a quick question. The minutes from June 25th were also included in the packet. Whoops, where's he gone? Oh, here he is.
I was listening, and I just had to go turn the light on.
Okay. I was asking whether it's the copy of the minutes of June 25th. Are those for us to approve this time?
I believe so. It wasn't on the agenda, but they were included, and I'll just have Daniel Hoyer just confirm that he did go back and make the revisions as discussed at the planning board the last meeting. And if he confirms that, then I think we're good to act on it.
Yeah, they were tabled at the last meeting, I believe, and I went through and made all the revisions.
Okay,
Thank you.
then let's take the minutes of June 25th, please. And would ask if there's any comments or if corrections were made. So I guess the motion would be that they would be approved as corrected or as noted, whatever.
Mr. Chair. Oh,
Do you have some comments, anybody?
I did, Mr. Chair.
Gwen?
It looks like all the changes, most of the changes that we recommended at the last meeting have been taken care of, but I just have two questions, and one is on line 219. Did we want to add conservation, or did we want to add commission to that line, or was that, I know we talked about it, but I don't know what the final decision was. It said Mr. Petropoulos noted that the site was inspected by Conservation and New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. And I think we talked about adding commission, Conservation Commission. So that would be one question.
I can try, because I thought I remembered that's what he said. He said conservation.
Oh, so we're going to leave it.
Commission,
Okay.
he likely meant, and that's what it was, but I think that's what he said. We had Daniel check on that.
Okay.
Well,
That was all I had, actually. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Gwen. Anybody else? Then I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of June 25th as corrected. Please.
I'm so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, John, thank you. Any discussion? Then a roll call vote again. Let's see. Got to find you people. John, you're first again.
I vote in favor.
And Jen, you moved.
Yes.
Okay. Aaron,
Yes.
Gwen,
Yes.
Pete, Cameron,
Yes.
and Molly.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Stand approved as amended. Thank you. Okay. Agenda's right in front of me. So move to the new business public hearings. Continued public hearing on the application of Gateway at Exeter LLC for proposed lot line adjustment and subdivision at 170 Epping Road. Lot line adjustment will transfer 2.10 acres of land from tax map parcel number 47-7 to tax map parcel number 47-6, and subsequently a proposed subdivision of tax map parcel 47-7 into two lots in conjunction with mixed-use development being proposed for the site. Subject parcels are located at C3, Epping Road Highway Commercial Zoning District, Planning Board Case 19-15. Now, as we have with this case, we are working with two items. This is the lot line adjustment one, and the next continued public hearing on the application of Gateway of Exeter LLC for site plan review and wetlands conditional use permit for the purpose of construction of a mixed-use development at 170 Epping Road, parenthesis, TM number 47-6 and 47-7, close parenthesis. The proposal includes a 224-unit multifamily residential complex, a two-story, 560,000 square foot mixed-use building that may include a 20,040 YMCA daycare facility, office retail space, and possibly a restaurant, along with associated site improvements. The subject parcel is located at C3 Epping Road Highway Commercial Zoning District and is Planning Board Case number 19-16. So, Dave, I'd like to have you help us know where we're at. Please.
Yeah, just bring you up to speed. You did a good job of explaining the proposal, so I won't reiterate that. The applicant did appear before the June 25th meeting. And although, there were several topics, but the two main issues discussed were traffic and wetlands. And the board voted to require a third-party review of the wetlands assessment. And they looked at several things that was in the scope that we wrote down at the last meeting. And the town contracted with GZA Environmental, and I don't know if it's GZA Environmental, sorry, if it's GZA Inc., but GZA we'll call it. And GZA went out there, conducted the report. I do have, and you have a copy of that. I emailed that to you today. And we do have Tracy Tarr is joining us from GZA. She was one of the wetland scientists that was on the site on Tuesday when they did their site visit. I was also in attendance for that. So she's prepared to, speak on her findings and answer any questions the board may have. Regarding traffic, there was talk of one of the main things was to talk about a DOT scoping meeting. The applicant did contact the DOT. They did throw out some dates for a scoping meeting. And it has been confirmed, but it is not until, I think it's next week. I'd have to look at my calendar again, but I think it's on the 29th or the 30th of next week. So we will be attending that and moving forward. But as part of the traffic too, we also have Jason Plord from VHB, the traffic consultant that was at the last meeting. And he's here this evening as well to, continue the discussion on traffic. Just as I reiterate what I've said before, the applicant has requested several waivers. 5 of which are outlined in a letter from Hannah Swanson, initially dated November 19th, 2019, and revised May 13th, 2020. The applicant also provided a letter that was previously included in your packets, dated May 11th, outlining a request for 2 additional waivers regarding recreation space and recreational impact fees. A second revision of the waiver request was submitted with the June 16, 2020 submission materials, which revised the waiver request number 5 relative to the off-street parking spaces required. That got some discussion at the last meeting. I did provide waiver motions for all the requested waivers in the memorandum. And I don't know how far the board's going to get this evening, but I did come prepared with suggested conditions of approval in the event the board decides to take action on the request. I also sent a copy of those conditions of approval to the chair and the vice chair, just so someone has it, because we're in person and I pass them out at the meeting, but I'm unable to do that. So I just made sure the chair and the vice chair had a copy. Also, I noticed that Molly Cowan has her hand up.
Okay. Molly, you have a question?
I do. I know that there are several people from the public here who are interested in both asking questions and or offering commentary. So I hope that we can outline now what the expectation is and when public comment will be permitted.
Okay. Well, it's a continued public hearing, and so I probably will ask Attorney Jim Peter Perlis. Can't say it. Sorry, Jim. To begin, because Tracy will here to report on the wetlands. We really want to focus, I think, on traffic and wetlands tonight, because that seemed to be where we were at when we tabled and continued. So when they are finished speaking and the board is finished pretty much with their questions, and the public is, and the meeting's open to the public all the time anyway, because they're listening to it and can participate. But when we are finished, then we will ask the public for their comments and concerns. And then after the board has completed and indicated me they feel they have discussed what they need to discuss, then I will close the public hearing and the board will deliberate. That's it in a nutshell.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did not prepare anything formal this evening. Actually, we thought the first part of the hearing tonight would be the report from GZA Geo-Environmental, and that would bring us current with the wetland issue. I think Dave gave a good overview of where we're at with traffic. He is correct. We have a DOT scoping meeting. It is a Zoom call for Thursday, July 30. And so we're anxious to have that meeting. But we've got nothing prepared to present. We thought the first piece of the meeting would be the report from GZA. So I'll listen to see how that goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy, you're on, and welcome.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I'll look around, make sure you can hear me. Look for heads shaking yes. All right. I learned the hard way to use my phone.
This is the senior Bob, yes and down.
All right. Thanks so much. Like a number of you said, GZA did go out on the site on Tuesday. Myself, I'm a certified wetland scientist, and Jamie Long, who's also a certified wetland scientist and licensed forester, visited. And knowing we had a large scope, Jamie focused on wetlands. He has 30 years of experience in wetland delineation, currently serves on the joint board, so has extensive experience in wetland delineation. I have a deep background in vernal pool assessment and wildlife, so I focused on the review of vernal pools and rare species. And of course, we were looking particularly for slender blue iris, also known as slender beardless blue iris, as well as swamp white oak, and then incidental observations for rare reptiles if we happened upon them. But of course, the plants being planted in the ground were of particular interest. And let's see, we also reviewed for functions and values. We did appreciate that Go was able to provide us their wetland data digitally, so we had that uploaded on tablets and our phones. That site would be very confusing without that data. You can easily get lost, it's very thick, to know where we were at, and to make sure we're on the front roughly 16 acres. We did not review the back proposed conservation area, so all of our observations are really for that front 16 acres closest to Route 27. Does that make sense? Great.
Yes.
And as Dave mentioned, Dave Sharples, Jamie went around with Dave and Brandon from Gove and augured all of the wetland lines and looked very carefully at the wetland lines and compared it to our digital data. We also found evidence of some old flags, which we used for observations, but that GIS data was very important. We did put our observations on an aerial plan, which, Dave, maybe you want to share that later. It might be more obvious for people to see what we noted, if that makes sense. And for the wetlands, we did know, overall, we had very large agreement. And I'll say, Jamie, if you don't mind me speaking plainly, is a tough cookie. He does not mind disagreeing with anybody. But we only found 3 very small areas, and I believe Gove concurred with those. And on our plan, they're known as flags A1 to A2. B1, which just connects two long linear close by wetlands, and then C1 and C3. And based on our GIS evaluation, that added roughly 730 square feet of wetlands, so not a huge amount. But of course, the applicant, if they agree with this delineation, might want to have it survey located to get an exact number. But just to give you a scale, not huge disagreement at all. So very, very concise wetlands. I did review for vernal pools, like I mentioned. As many of you know, because we're in the dry season, well outside the normal egg period for our vernal pool amphibians, it was focused on physical characteristics as well as secondary indicators. And our macroinvertebrates that use vernal pools are very important for these off-season assessments, because what we're looking for is, do we have minimum hydro period to support our primary indicators? And of course, as I mentioned in the letter, I did have access to a few documents that were from members of this board and from the Conservation Commission. I also had additional information from Gove, so I was able to put all those observations together. I did note 1 to 2 vernal pools that I would call the area in the isolated wetland by Route 27. On our plan, we call it Vernal Pool 1. Based on the observations of Mr. Steckler here, I looked at the tadpole. It was really consistent with a wood frog tadpole. And then Gove mentioned that they did see a single fairy shrimp. Fairy shrimp are primary vernal pool indicators. So even without the wood frog observation, that's enough evidence to say it meets our state's definition of vernal pool. Doesn't mean it's a highly productive vernal pool or one you might call significant, but meets the definition. And of course, very shrimp are tricky in that very neat life cycle where if you hit them at the warm part of the season towards the end of the spring, they pretty much all die as adults at about 65 degrees of temperature. So if you hit it at the end of the season, you're not likely going to see a lot. So it could be that earlier in the season, and this is just conjecture, but early in the season there could have been more. And they're like bunnies, where there's one, there's always more than one, right? So because they're taking their whole life cycle in the vernal pool, and then once they die, their entire population exists as eggs in the bottom of the pool, so just kind of a neat life history trait. So anyway, all those observations together, that area is a documented vernal pool. And looking at the grading plan of the applicant, it appears to just miss, although they should confirm that, the core vernal pool area. But of course, they'd be in the 100-foot buffer and as well as the town of Exeter buffer with the entrance road. The other area that we looked at was what we call potential vernal pool 2. This is the area that's shown as ponded water on the plan. And Gove was very upfront, talked about their observations of greener bullfrog tadpoles in there. I was able to dip net that. I found a minimum of six secondary indicators of different macroinvertebrates that prove a minimum hydro period. There's also an obvious drawdown, which is typical of longer hydro period vernal pools. Not all vernal pools dry down completely, but there was this obvious wet-dry cycle. It lacked a perennial stream. It lacked fish. So in the state DES definition of vernal pools, a biologist can call something a vernal pool when there's at least 3 secondary vernal pool indicators. It doesn't force you to. It gives biologists a little bit latitude. That's why I gave that term potential. We did not find evidence of primary vernal pool indicators, but we do know it's an amphibian breeding habitat, so perhaps of significance to the town. And we note that there are no proposed fill or grading in that area, which is nice. So it's nice the project avoids that. We did also do transects through wetlands and in part in uplands for swamp white oak and slender blue iris. Fortunately, the iris was still in fruit, so we're able to see the characteristics that you need to identify slender blue iris from our more common, what some people call purple iris or blue iris. And all what we observed was the common iris, so we did not observe evidence of the rare iris. We also noted extensive common white oak, Quercus alba. We did not observe any swamp white oak. It was interesting, though, with all the relatively recent logging, some of the white oaks were a little funky, if you will. So Jamie and I looked at them together. With his 30-plus years experience as a forester, we did make sure we confirmed the IDs of the trees we saw. We did not observe swamp white oak. Of course, again, we did not go in the back conservation property, so our observations don't reflect that area. I've been yapping quite a bit. Any questions from anyone?
Questions from the board?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that really summarized our observations. We did give a few recommendations you might consider on design, but our scope is really documenting resources, so that's the focus of my conversation tonight, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments? Gwen, you look like you're thinking.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Is it appropriate for questions from us at this point in time? My name is Thomas Leonard, and I'm here with Mr. Monahan and his team.
Yep. Does the board have any objection to that at this point? Gwen, can you turn on your microphone?
There's Pete Steckler, Gwen English also have their hand up as well.
Okay. Well, just like Tom, I'd like to have the board ask their questions first.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Pete? Your hand was up, Pete Steckler?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Tracy, for your work to confirm, validate, fully document the resources out on this site. So I really appreciate your work. I do have a question. I mean, you also said that you reviewed the functional evaluation of the wetlands, and in your memo or letter, I think you largely concurred with Mr. Quigley's primary functions. I was just curious, given that Wetland A, for example, is a confirmed vernal pool at this point, and so I'll just start with that one. I'm curious. If that sort of bumps up the uniqueness, heritage value of that wetland that wasn't called out. And similarly, I know that you're using the highway methodology, and I'm a little more familiar with the New Hampshire method, where a vernal pool like that in close proximity to public access along a highway, that sort of thing would be considered, where you could park a bus along the side of the road and easily access for, both fully abled and less abled people to provide some education opportunities around vernal pool habitat, that sort of thing. So those were two functions and values that I was just curious to hear your take on. If based on your review, if that would sort of bump those up for Wetland A and maybe even the area for the potential vernal pool. So thank you.
Yeah, no, very astute observations. You are correct in that with the vernal pools, certainly wildlife habitat and production export, which Grove did focus on as principal, are certainly important functions in any wetlands with vernal pools. And I do agree with you. I do typically note uniqueness heritage as a principal function when I have a vernal pool. I didn't make that note in this case because the remaining part of the property has much more productive and numerous vernal pools. So in this case, I did not elevate it. But you're right. Typically, if a site only had one or a few vernal pools, I would absolutely elevate that. So it's a good point. It's certainly a suitable function, and it arguably could be principal, but knowing that the town has buffers and is already focused on vernal pools, I didn't think it was a significant enough observation to discuss in the report, but I agree with you. Recreation is a little trickier in that it's not public property, to my understanding, it's private, so that technically limits access to the public. And although you can pull a car off, I don't know, I would want my kids on that busy road, right there, parking right adjacent to the road. So more typically, if there's more formal parking, I would elevate education and science value. But you're right, any vernal pool really has some educational value. So this one, productivity and evidence of indicators varies from year to year. So some years it might not be that exciting, but you make a good point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gwen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Tracy, for all the work that you and your team did on this. I appreciate it. I just have a question about the spotted turtle, and I know that wasn't something that we called out as something to look for when we requested this second look at this property, but I'm just curious how you go about looking for that species. Is it more just sheer luck that you happen to come across one when you're out in the field, or are there certain aspects of that property that would call attention to the existence of a spotted turtle? And is anything affected by the season? Are they apt to move from one place to another like a snapping turtle is, or other turtles, or what? I would just love to get a little bit more information about that species.
Yeah, great question. Sure. Spotted turtles do make regular movements to vernal pools, even maybe more tightly associated than Blanding's turtles. So anytime I see a potential vernal pool, I always have my eyes out for spotted turtles and Blanding's turtles. Even in this case, it wasn't explicit in our scope. If I saw one, I certainly would have mentioned it, obviously, in my letter, both being listed turtles. They are tricky to see, though. They're very cryptic, as you know. They blend in with a vernal pool. In this case, our vernal pools didn't have a lot of water, so it would have been easy to see them. And at this time of year, if a pool doesn't have water, they're often in more, if they're not nesting, say in June, later in the summer, they might be in more permanent marshes. And like Blanding's turtles, they make huge movements across the landscape. They're, very mobile. So I'd be looking in marshes, vernal pools, and then even road edges and fields for nesting in roughly June. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else on the board? Then I'll ask, Thomas is asked to speak, so you're on, sir.
Yes, so my name is Thomas Leonard. I'm a lawyer working with Tom Monahan and his team. And may I call you Tracy? I'm not sure how you like to handle this.
Absolutely.
I'm not used to doing these meetings on screens here, so I appreciate your patience.
Sure.
So I understand, I think I heard you say that basically you pretty much agreed with everything that Brendan Quigley had to say with regard to the iris, the swamp white oak, and the delineation of wetlands, a couple minor changes in the delineation of wetlands, but nothing of substance, really. So, and I think I also understood you to say that the functions were generally as Mr. Quigley described. I wasn't clear when you mentioned that the vernal pool that you did conclude, that's the one that Mr. Quigley did not come to the same conclusion?
Yeah, we'll let him talk about what he thinks. Sure.
Well, I just want to, for identification purposes, because what happened was we had a big discussion on this last time, and I don't mean to sound like I'm examining you. I'm just I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
All right.
Yeah, I apologize for the style here.
Oh, you're very kind. Have no fear. So I will direct you, I guess, to, here we go. I'm taking my state book out here, which I can't do in a normal meeting. It's kind of handy. ENVWT 104.15. Secondary vernal pool indicators means physical evidence used by wildlife biologists or certified wetland scientists who are familiar with vernal pool habitats as evidence of the presence of a vernal pool if primary vernal pool indicators are absent and other vernal pool characteristics suggest vernal pool habitat. Then it goes on to list a whole host of macroinvertebrates, a number of which I observed in that pool. And so because I didn't have a chance to see it, during the active egg season, my recommendation is that it be treated like a vernal pool.
Okay. And that's, I understand your conclusion, and that's fair. This is that small one, basically close to the road, though. Is that right?
Oh, so I was talking about the more permanent, like pond. So do you want to talk about the one by Route 27?
Yes, and the reason I'm asking questions here is I think I heard you say that it was small and that it was not impacted by the road, by the driveway, and that you wanted confirmation of that.
Yeah, so your team should confirm that, or this would be a normal practice, should confirm that it doesn't impact the actual ponded area where amphibians would be breeding. That's certainly a common expectation of the state.
Yeah.
And Army Corps often, where design can allow it, would ask for, even separate from a town buffer, a 100-foot vernal pool envelope, which is really important. That area provides leaf litter for amphibian food. It provides shading to maintain temperature, things like that. Those are all important things. The engineers on your team might say, hey, this is how I can maintain appropriate water temperature. This is how I can maintain forest cover around the majority of the pool. Those are the types of things I would be doing. And I did note in my letter, as I'm sure you read, that I believe your mitigation plan includes protecting a number of vernal pools, which with much more improved buffers that aren't directly bordering Route 127. Excuse me, I keep saying 127. 27. That's a common accepted mitigation measure.
Okay. That's part of my question. I think we're going to later hear from Mr. Jim Petropoulos that it would not be good engineering to move the entranceway and actually get it 100 feet outside of that vernal pool. But I know that you considered some of the other mitigation and you saw some of the other wetlands out there. I saw in your report that you thought the mitigation was probably appropriate under the present circumstance. Right. And I just would like to have you explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so what's common with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and prior practices of the Environmental Protection Agency is they would really much rather see protection of intact vernal pools that aren't impacted by existing roads. And certainly, at least what I can see from mapping, I didn't visit them, but all the ones in the proposed conservation easement area, based on data provided by GOV, have a number of egg masses or vernal pool indicators. What is also exciting is that it's a complex of vernal pools. It connects, as everyone on this board knows, to off-site conservation areas. So it has large upland buffers for the adult amphibians. Most of the year, they're not actually in the pool. They need intact uplands. So that's a really important and nice feature. And so in that case, federal agencies often accept lower buffers adjacent to lower quality vernal pools. That doesn't mean your team shouldn't consider maximizing the buffer to the extent they can while also maintaining public safety and everything else that's important, and traffic safety and everything like that. I don't know if your grading can be minimized. I don't know if plantings make sense, but you're right. Overall, that mitigation package is a great asset of this project.
Okay. In your conclusion, I got the sense that the more important potential vernal pool that you found in the front 16 acres was the one that does not have there's no impact over there. Is that a fair assumption or conclusion?
That's fair. If you have to pick, generally, and again, this is if you have to pick, pools with longer hydro periods support more species. This is supported by the literature. You'll also see in the literature, it's important to maintain a complex of pools with varying hydro periods, which you probably do with the offsite mitigation area. But if you had to pick, protect a pool that supports a higher diversity of species.
Okay. And in terms of the functions that you reviewed, you pretty much agreed with Brendan?
Say that question again, I'm sorry.
I think I heard you say that you, in terms of your functional analysis of the wetlands on site, you pretty much agreed with Brendan.
I do. I was happy, and I can be quite critical of functional assessment, at least in my own internal team. And what I look for is folks showing wildlife habitat, significant vernal pools, and production export. Those are important. And I saw that in the report, so I appreciated that.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other board members? Jen, you had your hand up a while. Yes, it's up again.
Jen Martell had her hand up, and then Pete Steckler.
Yeah, I just quickly wanted to ask Ms. Tarr if the vernal pool envelope, if that will be provided to the applicant as like a GIS layer, an AutoCAD layer to provide that verification that the entrance road is not impacting, and so that also that they can update their drawings with this new information that we have.
Sure, we're happy to provide that. I will note, though, that the basins were mapped based on the existing topography provided on the site plan. There's clear basins shown, so that's what we use to help us determine or estimate the boundaries. So technically they have the data, but we're happy to send the shapefile to the town and the applicant.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Pete, you're up here.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the primary functions of all the wetlands on site, according to Mr. Quigley, is wildlife habitat. And, you know, I don't know, Tracy, if you can speak to the scale and configuration of this proposed development program and how that affects east-west connectivity from the, you know, those backlands across Route 27 over to the east to Exeter's town forest, and the importance for, you know, species diversity, genetic diversity, to be able to move over time, not necessarily in one season, but maybe over multiple seasons, and having, you know, these connected wetland features to move along and to sort of leapfrog their way across the landscape over time to seed new populations that sort of wink out, or for other populations to move in. And I'm looking for your assessment of the scale and configuration of this proposed development and the impacts on the wildlife value, which is a primary function and value identified and agreed by everybody, I think, and how this project impacts wildlife value.
Sure. Again, very astute, no surprise. Connectivity is absolutely very important, especially to vernal pool amphibians whose adults are spending most of the time in uplands. Individual wood frogs might actually disperse 1,200 feet from woodlands to their native pool. Also, females travel typically longer distances than males to have good food sources, so they need safe travel from their uplands to their pools. And certainly the more you surround a vernal pool with development, the more likely you are to decrease its viability over time. And so, again, that's why I'm excited to see this project protect a number of vernal pools and connects them to conservation land. It is at the possible expense of that pool adjacent to Route 27. So anything that the applicant can do to maintain a travel corridor from that pool to that protected area would be great. But it is nice to see the development pushed up to 27 and not spread through that whole parcel. Granted, there's lots of wetlands and buffers, so they're kind of forced to do that, but it's nice to see that land protected to maintain exactly what we're talking about. Hopefully that answers your question.
Well, but would you agree that this wetland essentially cuts off east-west connectivity for species between that backland and other conservation lands further to the east, south of Route 101, for example? Anything, because those entire wetland systems are largely impacted and essentially completely fragmented by the scale and configuration of this development.
Sure. So you're speaking about the wetlands that are adjacent 27, not directly impacted but separated from the rest of the property, parent property. Is that what you're...
I think that what I'm talking about is, there's this mitigation effort for the backland where there's a lot of vernal pools and wetland habitat, but there's habitat further to the east towards the Squamscott River and Exeter's town forest, south of Route 101, and this, based on my read of this plan, it pretty much disconnects that effort, to that mitigation effort for that backland, to lands further to the east, again, behind the mobile station, for example, which you get into the Exeter town forest as you head east.
Okay. I see your point. I still think the mitigation package provides, again, a vernal pool complex with buffers and is appropriate. Doesn't mean that, whether it's the applicant, the town, other interested parties, shouldn't connect more properties. That's always beneficial. But I still think this project has value. But I do hear your point.
Yeah, and I think that my concern is that this is the last remaining stretch of Route 27 south of 101, where you have undeveloped land on both sides of Epping Road or Route 27. So it's sort of the last remaining connector, east-west connector. And it gets at the condition number 3 that we're supposed to be considering for the conditional use permit around let's see, where it says, to the extent feasible, the proposed impact is not detrimental to the value and function of the wetlands. And thinking about the importance of wetland habitat to wildlife movement specifically, that's I think you'd agree that that's important, and New Hampshire Fish and Game has really prioritize the protection of riparian corridors for a suite of species, that these wetlands really do offer that east-west connectivity. I'm not downplaying the value of the mitigation of the backlands. It's more about the wetland wildlife habitat value of these wetlands to broader landscape connectivity, and how this impact does appear to be detrimental.
Yeah, I mean, I defer to Brendan to defend the project, but I do see Route 27 being a major, separating east-west habitats, if I'm understanding what you're getting at. So I would encourage it to turn over to the applicant. They might have a different perspective.
Thank you. Anybody else? Is there anybody in the public, Dave, that would like to speak?
There are no hand raised.
Okay. So,
Mr. Chairman, we plan to make a statement and respond to some of these remarks now. I don't know if you'd like to continue it as a discussion or if you would rather that I wait until later.
Okay.
Whatever you would prefer.
Yeah.
Let me just announce it that, so you're looking for public comment. I see a bunch of attendees. Some are for the next project. I know that, but some are for this one. So just if you are waiting and you'd like to speak, just raise your hand on this. Oh, we have Eileen Flockhart-Rose raised her hand.
Okay. Let's see what Eileen has to say, please.
You got to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Actually, I have two comments, and they don't relate to either one of your major topics of discussion tonight. So I don't want to confuse the issues tonight, but I prepared something in writing that I would like to send to the planning board, if that would be a good vehicle for doing that. I very much would like to have some input on this project, but wetlands and the other discussion on traffic are not in my series of concerns tonight.
Yeah. Well, certainly a email response will be distributed, sent to the planning board office.
Well, hold on, Lang. It depends on when you close the public hearing. I mean, if you close the public hearing, we don't accept any more public comment after that. So can you email it right now to me?
Yes, I can email it to you, Dave, or to...
Yeah, you can email it to whoever, but include me, because that makes sure it'll get in the file, and then feel free to highlight the points.
Yeah, I'm just looking at two major points, but they're not connected to either of these topics, so I don't want to make you folks crazy.
Well, we can email it in, and perhaps a little later on before we close public hearing, because if it relates certainly to this project, we need to hear what your thoughts are.
All right, I will email that to Dave and whoever, and you should get that shortly.
Thank you. Any other hands, Dave?
Not at the moment. There's a hand on a panelist. Mr. Leonard has raised his hand.
Okay. Mr. Lennon, have you got?
Okay, thank you. So
Tom, go ahead.
Thank you. So on this particular topic, first off, thank you very much for all of your effort in this regard. I appreciate both Mr. Sharples and Tracy and all of the board's efforts. It's been difficult to work through this whole thing. I know some folks have very strong feelings both directions. Our point of view on this is that, first off, we believe, and I think the review shows that Gove Environmental, and in particular Brendan Quigley, did an excellent job out there. He spent a lot of time on several different occasions through the years. And I think the GZA report supports his findings. The one question out there is this small vernal pool that is a professional judgment. There wasn't an awful lot of indicia out there, and we're certainly willing to work with you on that subject. But I think the bottom line here is that, and part of what I would love to hear Ms. Tarr comment on is we're balancing things. We've talked a lot about different impacts, but the real focus seems to be on this one small area that's up by Epping Road. It's a small area, 400 or 500 square feet. It does not seem to be, and I think Jim Petropoulos can confirm that it doesn't seem to him that it is directly impacted. And so what we're doing is we're talking about balancing the benefit of protecting the buffer of that vernal pool as compared to engineering a safe intersection, and also as compared to providing what is a known public goal for the town of for Exeter, and that is affordable housing. So we have to balance these things. I realize it's a difficult question, but in the big picture, we started with 60 acres of land. It was, after a lot of study, it was our point of view, ours in terms of the development team, it was our point of view to minimize the footprint of buildings, concentrate development, and protect the most important part of the assets that are associated with wetlands. Pretty much everybody agreed. Brendan Quigley found on several occasions that the best wetland and the functions that were in most, the most effective functioning wetlands were in the rear. And that was a conscious decision. And we went to the Zoning Board of Adjustment knowing that, you know, we have the right to access upland, but it makes most sense to do it in the best and the fairest way while we balance these what amounts to competing interests. And that's where we are today. The Zoning Board of Adjustment agreed with us that we should move things to the front so that we could have that large 40-acre, roughly, piece of substantially wetland, important wetland, by the way, contiguous with other public property. And it's totally protected. It's part of the city, of the town of Exeter property under this proposal. And that's an important thing to acknowledge. And sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle when we talk about vernal pools, because yes, vernal pools are important. But I think Ms. Tarr has confirmed that in the big picture of this site, the 60 acres, this particular vernal pool is not as important as all of the others that we have made a great effort to protect. So I just ask the board to balance interests in considering this one thing. There are many concerns in that area in terms of engineering and in terms of the public need for affordable housing. The other thing that I would like to say is that we have studied these wetlands extensively, and I think that's probably an understatement. I guess I won't even go beyond that, except that I think we need to, and I hope that we can move to the next step here. I suggest to the board that this small area at the Epping Road, at the intersection of our proposed driveway and Epping Road, is not an impact that should prevent this project. But if we're at that point, I think we have enough information on this subject, and I guess I would respectfully ask the board to let's put that behind us. If this is what's going to stop the project, I think we need to know that now. I don't think it is, and I hope the board understands and sees our point of view on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments about the wetland situation at the moment? And let's talk maybe a little bit about traffic.
Mr. Chair, Pete Steckler has his hand up.
Okay, Pete, thank you. Steckler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I just wanted to point out that I think that this discussion isn't about, one particular small wetland. It's about the board understanding what's out there, the extent of what's out there, and the impact, so that we can, because the board needs to, go through the conditions to vote on a conditional use permit, and it considers a lot of different things, and it's not specific to one wetland, it's specific to this proposal and, the resources out there. So I don't want anybody to think that this, the reason why this has been drawn out is because we're obsessed with this one little vernal pool. It's so that we can understand, better understand, since not all the board members, I think, got out on the site, the extent of the wetlands, the resources out there, and be able to, and answer the questions to see if the conditions for the CUP are met. So I just wanted to say that. I don't think it's about this one little vernal pool. Thank you.
Yeah. We're trying to incorporate the whole project within the big picture. And I think the information we have now is adequate for us to make some decisions. So that's, and we appreciate Tracy's input and the work of their company to validate what we had. And this is typically what happens when we go with a third party. We learn a little bit, and we learn a lot, because of the original, or Brendan's work, not that we're questioning it, we just wanted to make sure that we were comfortable with that information, and we've done that in other cases. So that's why I want to kind of move to traffic. That seemed to be the other major concern we had, and I don't know if there are any questions we might have for Steve. Steve has something to say, I think. I see him on, and his hand is up. Steve?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to share with the board that we do not have anything new tonight to share with the board traffic-wise, and that's primarily because we've been in a holding pattern for this DOT scope meeting. And as you've been informed tonight, that's going to happen a week from today. And then I'm going to be very busy after that, and I'll have a lot to share. But for right now, I have nothing new to add.
Okay.
Mr. Leonard has his hand up. And then I received that email from the lady who wanted to comment, and I can read it into the record when it's appropriate.
Okay.
Would you like me to do that now, or are you going to? Mr. Leonard looks like he has his hand up.
Let's go with her letter to get that in the record.
Okay.
Please.
Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Attention planning board members, as a member of the public who is very interested in sharing my input regarding this project, I realize that this Zoom format and the current agenda will not provide me this opportunity. Having read earlier this spring about this project, I was very interested in learning more and having my comments heard. I learned that this project had been heard in October of 2019, but was not aware of it then. As traffic issues and wetlands concerns will be your focus tonight, I will present my questions and comments in writing and hope that they will be read and responded to. These are my two biggest concerns. One, this is a huge project with a great density of apartments, which truly calls for natural relief, both visually and environmentally. To do waivers of island plantings in the expanse of impervious surfaces is irresponsible in this day of climate heating. We need to consider health and our safety in this issue and not simply ease of snowplows. This is not going to be a community space for these residents and should feel pleasant and welcoming. This is going to be a community space, for these residents, and should feel pleasant and welcoming. I would also hope that solar panels are going to be an essential plan for the residential buildings as well as the commercial buildings. Number two, these 224 apartments are all only 1 and 2 bedroom units. This does eliminate many family groups that would like to live here. With 2 or more children, a 3rd bedroom is essential. What would the average rents be? How many workforce units are planned? And what would those rents be? Would daycare workers or restaurant workers in this complex be able to afford to live here? I hope you are able to consider these concerns and comment in some way or communicate your thoughts to me about them. Before this massive project gets a town approval, I would hope the townspeople get as important a voice as the many representatives of this developer. Thank you, Eileen Flockhart, 7 Jacks Court, Exeter, New Hampshire. Well, I can answer one. How many workforce units are planned, and that is 56. The ZBA put a condition that 25% of the units shall be affordable, and 25% of 224 units is 56.
Okay. Can anybody? Pete, Cameron.
I will also send this out to email it out to the board members so you have it in front of you if you have access to email.
David, when you say 25% workforce housing, now is that going to be concentrated in one of the buildings, or is it going to be spread between the three of them? I think there are. You know?
That was, I don't know. That was not stipulated. That would be a question for the applicant.
Yeah, I can answer that, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like. Yeah, so these are 224 units proposed in 3 separate buildings about equal size, and each will have 25% of the building will be affordable housing. Affordable housing is defined in New Hampshire as, it's also called workforce housing.
Yeah.
The thing that's interesting about this particular project is it's actually also committed to rental projects. So it's not something that we're going to sell. It's an apartment building with 1 and 2 bedroom units. The number of affordable units, as I say, will be approximately the same in each building. The other thing that we have provided assurances in is that we won't just build the market value, and we won't just occupy the market rate units of a building and then go to another building. We have to fill the workforce housing units. What workforce housing, and one of the questions that the letter raised was, what are the rents and things like that? What workforce housing requires is that in New Hampshire, workforce housing is by definition, and it's kind of a complicated calculation for the entire building. But the bottom line is that it's affordable. Affordable means 30% of your income, and these workforce units have to be affordable to families that have 60% of the median income in the region. So essentially, it's affordable in the sense of 30% of the 60% of the median. And it offers an opportunity for many. It's a diverse housing stock. They're basically affordable to regular average people, people with below median income. And that's the whole purpose of it. In some ways, it's not subsidized, but there's assistance in financing that is available for these kinds of things. Yeah. And that's one of the, you have probably heard that we're under a little bit of time pressure because of financing, and the financing happens at certain seasons. Basically, it's this August is when we got to make some decisions. But all of it is designed to be affordable to people that are, it serves a purpose of young families, young people, and it also serves the other end of the spectrum, perhaps people who have a home but don't want the home that they presently have as it's too large or whatever. So it allows for a continuing change in occupancy to open up housing units for other purposes. The other thing that this particular site does is it's immediately next to 101, which is an important thing. It's next to 101. I think you have a number of letters from some of the area businesses. It's also close to the industrial space that's out on Continental Drive. So all of those, that's part of what's going on here in terms of the balancing. But the workforce housing is specifically spread out over all three buildings, somewhat equally. We try to be equal, and it'll be restricted by documents that are on record. That's the other thing I wanted to mention. The zoning board asked us to restrict it on record. We will do that. We intended to do that. You have copies of all of that as part of the package that went in with the plans.
So basically, even though the construction here of the 3 units is going to be phased, each unit as it is completed will meet the requirement for the workforce housing.
Yes, each building will.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just so it's clear, Mr. Cameron, the phasing is truly phasing in the sense of construction phasing, because the plan is to build the whole complex at once with one financing package. Now, of course, that's the plan, and I admit that sometimes that changes, but right now, that's the intention, that there will be one financing package that covers the construction of all 3 buildings.
Thank you.
Nancy Belanger has her hand up.
Nancy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's really not a question for Attorney Leonard, but I did just receive a message from someone in the attendees, Lindsay Sonnet, who is having a hard time raising her hand and asked, oh, there's a hand up. I don't know if it's hers, but she sent an email to
it is
Dave.
hers.
Yes, could you check your email and read her whatever she said?
I got it. I told her I would read it into the record. I was just giving you first.
Thank you. I didn't get that.
No, I know you. How would you? It was between Lindsay just emailed me. I can do that right now. Let me pull it up. Okay. This is from Lindsay Sonnet at 3 Hampton Road. Chairman Plummer and members of the planning board, I wanted to offer what is a cautious endorsement for the Gateway project entirely due to the fact that it incorporates 56 affordable housing units. Frankly, I do wish it could be more than that, but I understand it may not be feasible. If I recall correctly, the units will only remain at the affordable rate for 30 years, and I do wish it was possible for that to be in perpetuity. You are probably well aware of the severity of the state's housing crisis. The crisis is also compounded by an extreme shortage of housing in general. Given that, we absolutely need to be doing everything we can as a community to address that so that we can attract and retain the workforce and the people that we want to be part of our community. I hope this board and our town can continue to find ways to expand and diversify our housing stock. Thank you, Lindsay Sonnet.
Thank you.
And just to answer that, there was, I believe Mr. Petropoulos said early on 30 years. It is in the documents that we received that it's 40 years. That's what it says. It says 40 years. The documents that they presented us with 40 years.
Okay. Dave, I'm wondering if we need to read in the letters of support from they're here from Osram and 6 Hour and our town manager, Rusty.
It's up
those
to
on
you,
the record.
It's up to you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
Well, I think I should. So there's no skeletons in the closet here. So I'll take a moment here to read these. Dear Mr. Plummer, I'm writing you to reiterate my support to Tom Monahan's mixed-use project, which was approved last year by the Exeter Zoning Board of Adjustment for mixed-use project in a C3 zone. Understand there's continued discussion regarding this project. I want to express my support for any project which offers opportunity for workforce housing. Workforce housing is one of OSRAM's biggest challenges of running our manufacturing operation in Exeter, New Hampshire area. We need more affordable housing for our employees. As a global manufacturing company, we are competing with some of the lowest labor rates in the world. We are competitive in our market while manufacturing in Exeter, New Hampshire location because of our technologies and our talented employees. However, it's very difficult to retain current employees and attract new talent. One of the biggest issues is affordable housing in the area. We have many of our employees commuting to work between 45 and 60 minutes in one direction. When you speak to these employees as to why they drive the extended distance, the answer typically involves a high cost or lack of housing in the New Hampshire seacoast area. OSRAM has the potential to expand over the next few years at our Exeter operating site. However, this will be in question if our recruiting efforts don't produce the required employees. Any project looking to affordable workforce housing or near Exeter, New Hampshire would have my support. Please let me know if I can provide additional supporting details to bring this to and other projects like this to fruition. Sincerely, Paul Valentine, Osram Savannah Inc., plant manager. Letter from Sig Sauer. Letter of support for Gateway at Exeter Mixed-Use Project Phase 2. Mr. Plummer, this letter is written in support of the submission of Gateway at Exeter Mixed-Use Project in the Exeter Planning Board, requesting approval to allow the construction of new housing, including dedicated workforce housing, quote unquote. That is Sig Sauer's belief that this is planned development would greatly support housing needs for both Sig Sauer employees specifically and employees of other Seacoast region employers. Sig Sauer is currently one of the largest employers in New Hampshire with a total of 1,551 employees spread amongst 4 New Hampshire locations, all within commuting distance of this planned development. 407 in Exeter, 101 in Epping, 995 in Newington at Pease, and 108 in Dover. A large percentage of these employees are skilled laborers who squarely fit into the demographic most assisted by additional effort affordable housing. The addition of these proposed workforce housing would provide much needed options for these employees, many of whom currently commute from the regions of the state or who are otherwise struggling to find affordable housing within the Seacoast region. 6 Hours experiencing an acute workforce shortage. Additional housing would not only assist current 6 Hour employees, but also aid in 6 Hours attracting and retention of new skilled labor. As reported in Seacoast Online just last year, the regional mean price for a single-family home was $510,000, while that of a condominium was $295,000. At the same time, the market volume declined by over 10% from the previous year. This low inventory, high-price market makes it exceedingly difficult for many working families to obtain long-term housing, especially if moving from region to with lower property values. The addition, if not only affordable workforce housing, but more housing in general, especially rentals and short-term options, will greatly assist 6 Hour in attracting new hires and assist the often difficult transition period for new employees moving from other regions. For the above reasons, 6 Hour fully support the proposed development and respectfully request the Planning Board favorably review and approve this proposed development and other projects like it that support the delivery of affordable housing to working families. And that's signed by Ron Goslin, Chief Operating Officer. And our town manager, dear Chair Plummer, on July 23rd, we'll have before you an application from Gateway Exeter LLC to permit multifamily residential complex as part of a mixed-use development on King property in Epping Road, down Epping Road. To the extent your regulations and process allow, I hope you're able to look favorably on this application. As you know, the town is looking to assist potential large employers and all employers with housing that will support our commercial base. Planning Board approval for this project will go a long way toward the town addressing its critical workforce issue. More diverse housing options are specifically cited as a goal in the growth section of the town's master plan. See page 47, recommendation number 1, adopted in February 2018 by the Planning Board. Companies are now more than ever seeking communities that are proactively able to show how they can support workforce housing for their businesses. This project will help keep Exeter at the forefront of these efforts. Over the years, King Property has had a share of intense interest, but due to very difficult site limitations, it's been difficult to get an underperforming parcel to bear fruit. The majority objective of the 2015 TIF plan adopted by the town was to stimulate development of commercial, industrial, and residential property that will provide new manufacturing and other business opportunities, retail, and office space. A mix of residential housing opportunities, professional services, conference and hotel services, restaurants, or other businesses consistent with a vibrant economic corridor. The proposal before you is very complementary use that will function well alongside the commercial uses existing in the corridor, as well as those recently proposed for our tax incentive financing, the TIF district. This proposal will also help meet the goals of the master plan, address the hardship on site, and ensure the remainder of the Epping Road TIF district development will be a success. Thank you for your consideration to this important project. Respectfully, Russ Dean, Exeter Town Manager. We all received those in our packet, I believe, but I just wanted to share that and get that on the record as input. So, did we have any other concerns? Yes. Steve said we don't know anything new, but
Mr. Chairman, we do have a couple other comments on the other issues that, one being traffic, and then at the last meeting, there was a question about the use that we would like to comment on too. So whenever it's appropriate, we're prepared for that.
Why don't you go ahead with that, please?
Thank you. So let me take the second point first. Through the course of the last month, we tried to address your concerns as stated in the last time. I think we have fairly addressed the wetlands. Certainly look forward to a decision in that regard. The other question was a question by Member Brown regarding the use of the property. And we have had some conversations with Dave Sharples recently, and I understand that the concern or one of the concerns raised was that this property being used for residential it's proposed as a mixed use project, and there's a strong belief that the commercial side of things should remain 48,000 feet as opposed to the 38,000 feet. You may remember, as a result of some of the concerns from earlier meetings, we actually reduced the size of the commercial building from 48,000 to 38,000. In talking with Mr. Sharples, he was concerned about that. And so I want to let the board know that we are prepared to do 48,000 feet. If this board would like us to do 48,000 feet of commercial space, we are ready to commit to that. The other part of the question, I think, that was raised by Mr. Sharples, and we've had some discussions today, and to be honest, we haven't been able to figure out how to word it, but essentially, the development team, Mr. Monahan, is committed to build 48,000 feet of commercial space if that's what the board prefers. We can't have it a condition of the permits or occupancy of the residential buildings because of the financing. The financing for this kind of project will be driven by bond requirements. And you just can't have a condition that says, for instance, that you can't build the third building until you build the commercial building. We looked into that. We talked about it today with folks up at New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, and we can't have conditions. Mr. Monahan and I and Mr. Sharples and others thought hard today about how we could satisfy your concerns and provide reasonable assurances on this commercial building. We are very committed to the commercial building. We obviously want to build it. We have a letter of intent, but it's been so long, we need to keep working that front. But I guess I just want to make it clear to the full board that we are committed to a commercial building. We prefer the 48,000 feet if the board is inclined that way, but we would agree to a 38,000 feet if that was the board's request. And then on the matter of traffic, the reason we don't have any more comment on traffic is we are, again, open to what the town and the state end up agreeing are reasonable improvements to the corridor. So we're expecting that through this scoping meeting, we as a group, and we are one of the participants, but obviously the city and the state, the town and the state are more important. But it's really the town of Exeter's program, and it's the state's highway, and we just have to come to an agreement on what's appropriate. Part of what's going on is just how the entrances work. Will it support a light? And if it does support a light, does that mean we abandon one of the entrances? We're open to all of that, but we really have to go to the scoping, and we have to go through this process. And I think probably my role here today is to simply say that we want to participate in that. We would like to get an approval with we're open to a condition that we have to work as part of that team to resolve these issues and make sure these things get done. And we're certainly open to that. But the problem we have, of course, is that we can't control these kinds of things in terms of time or any other fashion. So those were the two other primary issues, I believe, that remained open from last go around. And we're certainly open to questions if there are questions on any subject, those or any other one. We think we can answer them. And we do think that we're ready for an approval. While it might be a conditional approval, we think we're ready for an approval here tonight. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So I would ask if there are any more comments from the public. Have you seen anything there, Dave? Any hands? Yes.
Okay, I unmuted myself. Yeah, Eileen Flockhart has her hand up.
Okay, Eileen?
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are.
I wondered if the developer could answer the question I posed regarding solar panels on the buildings.
Certainly can ask where they're at with that. Mr. Leonard?
I can try to answer that. So the difficulty with this, of course, is that some of these units, the workforce housing units, don't actually support the construction costs. So all this project is very tight on costs. We will certainly look into those kinds of things. But we can't make a commitment because it's so much driven by cost. The one thing that I would say, and I actually probably should have said it before, I appreciate the comment about, this is a big project and the footprint or the energy footprint, if you will, is important. But I think that keeping the back 40 acres open, protected, not developed in any way, that's a significant assistance on this front. We can't commit to solar panels now, but if they're economically helpful, then that's obviously something we'd love to consider.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Tom, is your hand up or you just putting your hand up?
It's up.
Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Tom Monahan. Through the Monahan family, we are the owners of the property, the proud owners of the property, also the owners of Garrison Glen out back, which is at the outset back in early in the century, we acquired and have owned it since, and have successfully developed a few parcels. The most recent was a Unitil parcel that we actually sold to Unitil, which we didn't want to do, but we felt that the sale to Unitil would be important for the community and the developer, our family. But one of the important things about this particular development is that we are not going to be using natural gas or oil. It's going to be all electric for all those reasons, that are important to us all, and to help the footprint. And it was a conscious decision that was made, and it was made for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the part of the board? Are we comfortable that we have the information we need to make decisions? Because I think the next step would be to start looking at waivers, if we're so inclined. Any thoughts, David?
Some bunch of hands just went up. We got Jen Martell and then John Gruder.
Okay. Who did you say was first?
Jen Martell.
It was me.
Oh, okay, Jen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I feel like with the big question mark of the traffic, what we hear back from NHDOT, I think, is going to, and the town regarding traffic could really change the layout of this. I personally wouldn't feel comfortable acting even conditionally on this application tonight with the big traffic question mark kind of out there. One entrance, two entrances, it's like, oh, it could all change. But I would definitely be supportive of going through some of the waivers tonight, because there are a lot of them, and I think, it'd be good for the applicant to hear our thoughts on those before we leave.
Thank you. John? Turn on the speaker, please.
Okay, thanks. I brought it up last month, and I want to know where we stand with the design of the buildings. If has anything been changed, refined? I know we don't have a final yet, but do we have a better idea what it might look like?
I think.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Jim Petropoulos, Hayner Swanson. And yes, Mr. Gruder, we did hear your comments at the last meeting. You had some concern about some of the architecturals. And I just received yesterday some new perspectives, which I forwarded to Dave. And Dave, do I have the ability to call up some plans?
You should be able to share screen. You are a panelist.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to just scroll down to the new perspectives, if I may, and then just highlight to Mr. Gruder some of the changes. These were provided by Procon, as you can see, with their title block down in the lower right-hand corner. And the changes, Mr. Gruder, that you will see in the perspectives that I'm about to show you are as follows. Several different several different view areas, several different looks of the project. But architecturally, there was a reduction in the size of the banding at the roof level of the commercial building. And I believe it was the banding up top that was reduced. They lowered the roof of the commercial building. They changed the stone finish, and you can see it on a couple of the different elevations of the apartment buildings. You can just pick up corners. Yeah, and there's a better look at it. I believe, Mr. Chairman, the last architecturals had a stone veneer finish on the apartments, and this plan represents a brick veneer finish. They also adjusted a number of the gables, the vinyl sided colors, some of the panel locations, and the roof areas went from white to gray in some of the peaks here on the buildings. And so those were the main architectural changes to the perspective. Again, Mr. Gruder, we received these yesterday. We forwarded them to Mr. Sharples in advance of tonight's meeting.
Is that the 48,000 square foot building?
This is actually the 30. No, I
38,000.
I think it is the 38,000. Yes, sir. But it would be the same principle, same architectural principles if we end up going back to 48. Yes, sir.
And that is a brick veneer on the first floor of the apartments?
As I understand it, yes.
And is this what we're going to build? Or is this subject to change again?
This is the intent, yes.
That's the intent, but that wasn't the answer to my question. If it hasn't been decided, it hasn't been decided. I'm curious.
Typically, architectural elevations are part of a site plan application, and I think if we had a significant change, we would need to come back for your review. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave.
That's certainly how I view this, is you're representing that that's what you're going to build.
Yeah. Yes. I see Mr. Monahan nodding. Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Tom.
I'm set.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. That's good.
Now, Pete Steckler is next up.
Okay, Pete.
Well, Gwen had her hand, now it's down. Okay, was Gwen, if she still wants to, but then it's Pete Steckler.
You ready to speak, Gwen?
I'll let Pete go ahead. I just had a couple questions and a comment.
Okay.
But I can wait.
Step right up.
Thank you, Mr. So given that I'm not entirely clear on process here and at what point alternates don't get to weigh in and have to stay out of the conversation, I just wanted to bring up a few more points regarding the conditions for the conditional use permit for the Wetland Overlay District. I can hold those if it's more appropriate to hold those till later, when we dig into that, but I didn't want to miss my chance to weigh in.
Well, when the public session closes, that's also when you stop participating. So only the board, only the acting board deliberates at that time. So if you need to tell us about it now.
Okay, well, I'll bring some issues up then. So just reading again the conditions regarding the conditional use permit for the Wetland Overlay District, I wanted to flag a few things. Specifically condition number 3 and the answer provided by the applicant to that condition, justifying or, sorry, I'm getting some feedback. That the proposed impact is not detrimental.
Hold on, Pete, for a second. If you're a panelist and you're on the call and you're not speaking, can you please mute yourself so there's no background? Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, the proposed impact is not detrimental to the value and function of the wetlands. And I would just ask my fellow board members to really read the justification for meeting that condition. And based on my opinion, there is no answer to that. It's it's essentially a restatement of the functions and values that the applicant has deemed are primary and secondary, but they don't actually address the question. So I think we'd really be derelict in our duties to approve this without a real explanation as to why the proposed impacts to these wetlands, which are very extensive, are not detrimental to the value and functions of the wetlands. There are some other ones there around number 4, that the design, construction, and maintenance of the proposed use will, to the extent feasible, minimize detrimental impact on the wetland or wetland buffer, and that no alternative design which does not impact the wetland or wetland buffer, or which has less detrimental impact on the wetland or wetland buffer, is feasible. And again, I said this, I think, at the last meeting. In my opinion, the scale and configuration of this development is unsuitable for this site, and that there is a development that would be suitable, that would meet this condition, but when you maximize your development footprint and impact so many of the wetlands, there's no avoidance or minimization that we're really seeing here. That's meaningful. So again, I think there's a real issue there. Number 6, that the proposed use will not create a hazard to individual or public health, safety, and welfare due to the loss of wetland, the contamination of groundwater, or other reasons. I'm just pulling the town's hazard mitigation plan up on my phone here, since I don't have multiple screens, and just want to note that I think everybody can acknowledge the value that wetlands play in terms of absorbing precipitation and not letting that precipitation, flow off of the landscape at excessive rates like a developed parcel does, impervious surfaces. And that based on the town's hazard mitigation plan, I'm just going to list all of the areas identified as flood hazards by the community that's downstream of this. So along Brentwood Road by Greenleaf Drive is a known flood hazard. In the Michael Ave area by Colcord Pond is a known flood hazard. The crossing of Brentwood Road closer to Colcord Pond is a known flood hazard. The area along Crestview Drive is a known flood hazard in our hazard mitigation plan. The crossing of Front Street is a known, and in the vicinity of West Side Drive is a known flood hazard. The crossing of Linden Street all the way down across Court Street and through the PAA grounds is a known flood hazard, and proceeding down through town. So there are some significant flood hazards associated with this watershed, and we are considering approving the development of something that is on top of those wetlands that hold back a lot of water. So I just really wanted to flag that and be thinking about the broader community impacts associated with this project. So I'll leave it there for now. I also wanted to, I guess one last thing, and this maybe Tracy Tarr can weigh in on this, but the applicant's team has really represented the wetlands on this site as low quality wetlands to, I think, minimize the value of these wetlands. And I don't see that the functions and values associated, identified as primary, including vernal pools, leads to the conclusion that any of these wetlands are actually low value wetlands. So, Tracy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, but thank you very much.
Sure. Pete brings up a good point where in permitting, we're often put in this instance where we start using terms like low value and high value, and I would caution us to use it as a general term with wetlands because, wetlands have a diverse suite of functions and they might be low in one function but higher in others. So we talked about how the wetlands on site do provide a high level of wildlife habitat and production export. So I wouldn't just generically use that term. You might use it describing certain vernal pools over other vernal pools when you look at the full context of the assessment over multiple years, but I wouldn't just broadly call the wetlands low functioning. That's just, my opinion, although I'm sure I've fallen into that occasionally. I try to avoid that now because it's just too simplistic. And I'm sure when the applicant has a chance to speak, they might talk about the drainage that they're proposing to offset the fill and how that influences flood protection. So that's something I can't answer because I didn't, review that. I'm certainly not an engineer and didn't review the design, but I would encourage you to get that information from the applicant. Anything else? Pete, did I cover all your questions?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
John Gruder, well, Gwen still, and then John Gruder and Nancy Belanger. And then Pete physically has his hand up, so add him to the list as well.
Mr. Chair, I've moved my hand down for the moment, so if you want to go to the next person, thank you.
I moved my hand down as well.
Okay.
Oh, Nancy still has her hand up.
Nancy still has a hand up. Nancy.
I do. I have a question from a few meetings ago that I don't think we ever got a final answer on. And it's for parking or limited parking in the conservation back area. There was some back and forth with the Conservation Commission on whether they were going to recommend that there would be parking available or not. Does anyone know where that stands, Mr. Sharples?
Dave?
Yeah, I think the Conservation Commission, is Kristen still on here?
Yep, she's down there.
Let me just, hold on. I'll dig it out. I mean, there's parking still in the back. There was a little bump out between buildings, the roadway that goes between building C and building B continues along, and there was a half dozen parking spots that were initially, my understanding, is set aside as a parking lot for access to a trail network there. But the Conservation Commission did not feel comfortable recommending public recreational access due to the, the vernal pools and the, sensitive nature of the natural resources in that 47 acres proposed for conservation. Last I talked to Kristen, I believe they were possibly entertaining some, maybe like using the old logging road on the side to access, pedestrian or bikes or whatever to go back and not go on to the, 47 acres, not have any internal trails. So I think that's where it's at. I'd look, maybe the applicant confirm that one way or the other, but that's my understanding.
So can I just follow up, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
If we've got 40 acres that are going to be for conservation and no parking, it's going to be conservation land for no one to access. Am I understanding that right?
Well, I mean, it's not going to prohibit public access.
So it's going to be for the people who live in the apartments?
No, I mean, I think some conservation is for, non-human activities is the most benefit for the wetlands, the vernal pools to thrive, provide wildlife habitat, stormwater, water quality, tree canopy and all the benefits of that. I mean, not all conservation land that I've seen is to, benefit or to be or for an active recreation use.
Okay, so I understand that. So this conservation area is going to be potentially off limits to people? We're not there yet.
No. My understanding was there was originally let's put a trail network in here, but due to the sensitive nature of this, not every landscape is suitable for trails. And I believe the Concom thought that the sensitive nature of the natural resources out here, we don't want to encourage trail networks and encourage a lot of recreation in and around this area.
Okay, so one final part of this is that when that determination is made, I just think it's, however that's publicized, I think it's important to do so. I just, when townspeople, I think of conservation land, they think of being able to access it, at least by staying on trails. So I had a concern about that from before. But so thank you, Mr. Chair.
Kristen, am I right on that? Am I on top?
Yeah, so an echo.
Yep. Loud and clear.
Okay, great. So the Conservation Commission does recognize that if there's land behind this apartment complex, the public's going to use it. And they felt that in order to balance the sensitivity of the resources there, the only place that seemed viable for a trail was to use the existing already impacted logging road. And so they proposed moving the connection not where the trail parking was identified on the plan, but further to the northwest corner of the development where the curve in the road is. And that would connect use to the logging road. So a similar project such as this would be 80 Epping Road, for example. There is not a dedicated parking spot on 80 Epping Road, but the public is welcome to walk that trail. The Conservation Commission was not supportive of connecting this trail network to the Little River Conservation Area for a number of reasons. The resources that are present, you'd need to cross Bloody Brook if you followed that logging road. And frankly, there's quite a bit of challenge keeping road trails in line. And so resources that are significant and sensitive, the Conservation Commission is strongly encouraging to limit from bicycle use. So their recommendation was foot traffic only.
Okay, so one more question then, now that Kristen has spoken. So will there be still designated parking, even a small amount, and a sign that says, walk this way to walk the trail? Do we know that?
I don't.
I don't believe the applicant can confirm, but I don't believe the plans were revised yet to relocate that trail.
I froze, so I'm sorry, I did not hear you. Did you hear my question?
I did.
Okay,
Yes.
I didn't hear your response, I'm sorry. I got a notice that my internet is unstable, so.
So I don't believe the applicant has resubmitted plans that show the trail connection at that other location yet.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, to add to this, I'm not sure that the location Kristen is talking about is on our property. I'm actually thinking it's off our property to what I would believe would be to the north.
I think you're right.
No, it is, and I can, I don't have the access to the plans, but if you could bring up the aerial image of the wetland map, you would be able to see the logging road.
Well, let's see if I can find it here.
Sorry.
So here's the aerial.
Do you have the one with the development on it?
This is the existing conditions plan. You'll see a very slight remnant of a cart road here, Kristen.
That's not it, yeah.
No.
Okay.
I believe it is on the plan.
So if you move your, I'm sorry, this is hard. If you move your hand straight up from where it is and touch the curve in the road, right there is access to the logging road.
Really?
I think that's where it is, yeah.
But I believe Ms. Belanger's question is at public access. And I'm not sure that's the case. We had originally intended for this to be a trailhead, a spot where the public could come and park and access this 43 acres that's part of the overall property. We were
And
asking,
the challenge with that, when the Conservation Commission was considering that, if you look to the right of where that parking lot is, there's a large wetland complex. And so the commission did not feel that, given the sensitive resources out there, there was justification to create additional wetland impacts to provide access over that location. So they went on site, walked the area, and came back with a recommendation.
yeah, the thinking was a kind of a Boy Scout footbridge or some sort of little homegrown access. It didn't have to be much to make that connection, so.
Right, okay.
Okay. Thank you. Was there somebody else lined up, Dave, to speak?
And Gwen now has her hand up and then, oh, she just took it down.
She kind of.
She's waving again.
Yeah, okay. Would you like to speak, Gwen? Turn your microphone on, please.
Okay.
There we go.
Well, now just to clarify, I'm was understanding that there wasn't going to be parking for a trailhead, and now after the very last comment, now I'm not sure, but I'm feeling like that isn't a good place, that we don't need a trailhead parking for all the reasons that have been talked about. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page on that. I think this property is the land that's being set aside for conservation is mitigation for the development, and it is very sensitive. And I completely agree with the Conservation Commission feeling that this isn't an area that we should be putting trails on and encouraging people to hike on it. It's not. Yeah. It's not saying that we can't. It's just not saying that come one, come all, bring your bikes, bring your dogs, bring your everybody and explore. It's sensitive, and I think we have to respect that. So my feeling is that if that parking area is in the plan now, that that we should not have it there.
Okay. And I think I hear.
My opinion.
I think the parking area originally was for because the trailhead came right off of the end of that, but I think that they're having it as parking now because of the needs already on site. So I think they just repurposed those 6 spots, and those will be guest parking for visitors to the people who live there.
Right. So it's part of their parking calculation.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
I mean, yeah, it is.
Jim, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That parking is part of our project parking.
Okay.
It was originally intended to be a point of access to the back land. Kristen's right. They wanted us to discourage that. They wanted us to take away the proposed access crossing there. We did represent a location here that would allow residents not to cross a wetland, but to gain access to the back there. But to answer Ms. Belanger's question, there's no dedicated public parking in any of those locations for public access in that location. I think I'm correct on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds like that's the way it should be, but that's good. Thank you.
John Gruder has his hand up.
Okay,
Question
John?
on parking. Didn't we determine last month that you actually had extra parking spots?
Yes, sir.
And you're not going to reduce those?
we hadn't intended to, or we're open to discuss it, I guess.
Well, did the shrinkage of the commercial building have some impact on that, Jim?
It helped a little bit, Mr. Chairman. And also, if you remember at our last meeting, we had the Urban Land Institute shared parking study, which also confirmed that, the non-coincidental peaks of the two uses, that we have ample parking. Mr. Gruder is correct. We have ample parking, yes.
But it seemed like you were quite a few spaces over ample. And I wonder if you need it, and if we don't need the pavement area, that would be nice.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think the other thing that was going on at the last meeting is we reduced it from 48,000 to 38,000. So there was that was the primary source. Actually, that was the reason for reducing it, because there was a call for more, or there was a question about more parking. But I'm hearing that we are not going to go to the 48 unless the board not going to 38 unless the board asks. So I think we need the parking there.
Maybe you do. I seem to remember that there were like an extra 60 or 70 parking spaces, which I didn't understand at the time.
Well, that's an extra based on the Urban Land Institute calculation, but not based on the town regulations. So we were kind of caught in between there. But we're certainly willing to hear you on what you wish.
All right. Well, I obviously wish we didn't have to have extra parking spots if they're not needed. Yeah. But someone else may wish to have them. So I'm just curious about your numbers. I'm all set, Dave.
Okay.
Gwen has her hand up, and
Dave, just for you, I asked them to speak. The hour is 9 o'clock. We do have another case ready to move. However, if we're not going to get much further on this, or we need more time on this one, then I need to let those folks know so they can sign off for the evening. But I don't think, Dave, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we may get to some waivers, but I'm not sure we're not going to wrap this up in 10 minutes. That's what I'll say.
Would agree.
Would you like us to comment on some of the questions raised about the conditional use permit? We're prepared to do that if you'd like. We'd like to keep this thing moving forward.
Yep. Well, Jen, you had suggested we start looking at some of the waivers, but before we do that, then I need to close the public hearing. I want to make sure that anybody that wishes to comment has had that opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, does that mean that I would not be able to comment on Mr. Steckler's points? Or do you want me to make that comment now?
Yeah, you would need to make that now.
I think you should make that comment now. Thanks for mentioning that. Yes.
Okay, if I could just quickly point out, I think I appreciate where Mr. Steckler's coming from. I appreciate his background, his obviously he spends his life protecting wetlands, and I understand that. But I think we've also heard from a number of people, both Tracy Tarr and from Kristen, that the rear portion of this property is significant and sensitive. And that's what's happening here. We are protecting very significant and very sensitive areas and providing that to the public for protection by the Conservation Commission. And that's exactly what these waivers are dependent upon. The other thing I think that needs to be stated again is it's contiguous, and that's part of the reason, contiguous to other public property. That's part of the reason why it's so important and so valuable to protect. As far as number 4, the minimization of things, these buildings are 5 or 6 stories, and I actually forget, it's been so long since we decided, but my real point here is that the footprint of these residential buildings is substantially smaller than a similar sized building of an industrial building or a commercial building. Commercial buildings and industrial buildings have to be 1 or 2 stories at most. Most of them are 1 story. Here we have taken a use, minimized the footprint in order to occupy the front portion of this property. And while these wetlands may be valuable, I think everybody agrees that the most valuable ones are to the rear. In a very general sense, I appreciate that each wetland has a function. And then the only other comment I have, and certainly Jim Petropoulos can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you design the water and the drainage facilities for this project, we have to make sure that no more water leaves the site than comes on. And that's part of what the engineering does, so that the flood capacity of the wetlands, to the extent that they get filled, that flood capacity has to be replaced. And why don't I leave it at that? But we feel like we've met, and we've got an extensive written narrative to support the waivers. We certainly can answer detailed questions on it, but we think you have all the information you need unless you have a question. So, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, please.
No, Jay, your response on drainage is correct. It's about, quantity and quality. And with regard to quantity, we're providing stormwater basins to attenuate these peaks. The design has been flushed through a peer review. It's been flushed through the alteration of terrain permit process at the state. So I feel comfortable that we've attenuated the downstream condition with our stormwater design.
Okay. Any more questions? You scratching your neck or waving your hand, Jen?
Raising my hand. I think Gwen had her hand raised.
Gwen, Jen, and Aaron.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of want to circle back to the comment that Aaron made at the last meeting, which I agreed with, and I'm not going to try to put words in his mouth that he may not have intended to say, but I think his point was that we have established the TIF, and I think the citizens generally thought that this was going to be an effort to encourage commercial or industrial use on these properties, and that in looking at this plan, clearly the larger portion of the building that is going to take place on this, if it goes forward, is residential. And I think he was expressing disappointment in that. That said, it seems like we that tonight, I think it's important for us to determine whether we want to encourage him to put in a 48,000 square foot building or a 38,000 square foot building. And I think my personal feeling is, and now I'm going to go on to what Pete Steckler said, is that there is a massive amount of building on this land. It does impact a lot of wetland. And even though I would have preferred to see more, in spite of the need for workforce housing, I think in order to protect a little bit more of the land, I think I would encourage the 38,000 square foot footprint for the commercial building. And that may not be a universal feeling among the members of the board, but I think because we still have to deal with traffic and parking, I think it would be fair to have the applicant know tonight, if we can, exactly what our thoughts are on that particular aspect of the plan. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. Who was next, Dave?
Jen and then Aaron.
Jen, okay. Sorry, Jen. Shouldn't forget you.
I just wanted to quickly circle back on John Gruder's question about the parking, because I looked up the ULI study that was presented at the last meeting. And so there's a ULI shared parking study, which came up with a maximum of 270 spaces that would be necessary. And just for reference, if you just went straight by the town requirements, there would be 508 spaces necessary, I think, if I did the math right. And the applicant is providing, I believe, 409 spaces. Of that, there's 243 for residents and 27 for commercial. So I would also support removing those 6 spaces in the back. It seems to me like an excessive amount of pavement for only 6 spaces that are probably not necessary looking at those numbers.
Awesome. Thank you. Aaron.
Lang, I was going to ask you, do you think we're going to get to the next item on the agenda, or are you going to continue to slog at this one?
No, it's 9:10 now. 10 o'clock is enough to go. And even if we started, that we're not going to do that due diligence, I don't think, with that project. So, Chad, Dave and I spoke about that earlier, so I'm not even sure we're going to get through the waivers by 10 o'clock, but unless the board wishes to table this and move along to the other project, but that's going to take 10, 15 minutes right there. And they have the floor, and I think if we can progress some more on this one, then that's a better use of our energies. And respect the fact that the next case is here and been ready to go, but we're aware that knowing they're both very big, important cases, and we can't deal with them as quickly as we might like to, but we have to do our due diligence and hear the folks out and give us our thoughts. Yes.
Do you want to take a little, I mean, I don't know, I guess it's not a recess, but just like a couple minutes and talk about that? I mean, it's not about this project.
Okay, yeah.
But I noticed that Attorney Justin Passe, that doesn't have anything to do with Gateway, has his hand up because he might want to speak on what you're just talking about. So
okay, that's fair enough.
You want to just switch gears. I mean, I think that's great. You're trying to be cognizant and respectful to the attendees. There's been a lot of people waiting as well in the public for that next case. So, but Justin might say something if you'd allow him.
Sure. Justin, are you there?
Hi, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Justin Fasse here. Thank you for the consideration in hearing me tonight. We were just going to say, first, we appreciate the time and for raising this issue sort of midway through the other application. We would welcome, and certainly my client would welcome, a continuation to the next date available. I understand with some discussions with Dave Sharples today that may be a month from now. Maybe we would request as consideration being put first on that meeting if that's possible, but to just secure some traction on a direction tonight, I think that would be a reasonable course if it pleases the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you could continue that case till the August 27th meeting, and if you did that now, then that would allow the attendees and everyone to sign off because we won't be discussing it.
Okay. Sounds like a reasonable solution there. So would someone make a motion, please, Aaron? Yes.
I'll make a motion to continue the hearing for Brian Crisat's yield plan, planning board case number 20-2. And what's the date, Dave?
27th of August?
August 27th at 7 p.m.
7 p.m. First on the agenda. Yep. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, either one.
Pete Cameron. Okay,
I'm
second.
still here.
All right, roll call vote. Let's see. Aaron,
Yes.
Pete Cameron,
Yes.
John Gruder,
Yes.
Gwen English,
Yes.
Jen Martell,
Yes.
and Molly Kelly.
Yeah.
And I vote yes. So
Thank you.
Page 2010 will go on, and we'll see you in a month, and thank you for your patience. Okay. I said before, and I'll say it again, I don't think we should go beyond 10 o'clock, so we got 45 minutes. So,
So Lang, I still have my hand up.
yes, okay. You moved on the screen. Go ahead.
Okay. So Gwen summarized one of my concerns pretty well. Gwen, good job. Regarding the commercial space. And I'm definitely concerned about the development of that corridor, not just this parcel particularly, but that entire corridor and the TIF process and how the public infrastructure was developed and the intent of the public infrastructure and how that was presented to the public that ultimately funds that infrastructure. So I'm very much in favor of the 48,000 square foot commercial. I don't think that's the only way to limit the impact of this project is to limit the square footage of the commercial. There's a much more substantial residential piece that could be reduced as well. And to me, the intent really is viable commercial development in that corridor. And since I've been on this board, there are a couple fairly significant residential developments on 27 that have commercial approvals with unbuilt property still for years now.
Yes.
This is a really bad trend, I think, within what we're seeing on 27, because I can envision future variants being sought to convert those to residential uses in that unbuilt property. Would not shock me at all. And so and these guys have the ZBA approval. They have a large number of units approved, and they have a commercial responsibility that's part of that approval from the ZBA that I think we should uphold. The challenge is to how to secure that being upheld. And Attorney Leonard spoke to that earlier with challenge that they face in their financing. So hopefully we can thread that needle that will allow the developer to get the proper financing and meet the requirements of the loan that they're trying to do and secure the town's interest in having this parcel partially developed commercially and actually built. Not just approved at this board and have that area sit empty for years, or maybe they put an Aroma Joe's out there. We're going to be happy about that. So, it's a good project. They're really trying to do some good things with it. I commend a lot of the work that's happened here. But I do think we have to figure that piece out.
So how did you feel the size of the commercial building should be? Should that be to the full 48,000?
Yeah.
To maximize? Yeah. To maximize that, yeah.
Yeah.
That's, I have to agree with you. I think that's based on what you said anyway, and knowing that, that's partly our responsibility to keep that piece coming along.
Mr. Chairman, if it helps in that discussion, I think it's fair to say that the 48,000 foot building will not have any additional impact to any of the wetlands. In other words, it's not a more impactful project.
Yeah.
Gwen has her hand up.
Gwen, yes.
I'm going to ask Aaron to elaborate on the comment you just made about keeping the commercial building at 48,000 square foot, but maybe doing something different in another part of the property. Did you have a specific thought in mind when you said that?
Gwen, I think that I would leave it to the applicant to discuss if there would be a change in the impact or not, but Attorney Leonard certainly just volunteered that if we were at 48,000 square feet versus the more recently suggested smaller square footage, there would not be additional wetlands impact. And I know that, at least I would assume that when you commented you would be okay with the 38, I think your concern was wetlands mitigation when you made that.
Yeah, it's wetlands, it's more impervious surface, it's a combination.
And I think that's certainly understandable. But I do think that, from my perspective, the commercial piece is the more vital piece in that corridor, right? And I guess my biggest concern of that is how that came to be, how public water and sewer came down that road, how we all voted and what the master plan was discussing.
Right.
You know, we've certainly approved a lot of workforce housing on this board, and we have promoted it. And this project is offering that. I think it's a high percentage as well. 25% is a pretty heavy percentage.
Pretty big chunk, yes.
But the commercial piece is part of it as well. So I think we really have to try to ensure that some commercial structures that are viable start getting built on that road.
Well, we've got the Meeting House, we've got 80 Epping Road. Neither, as you said, neither of those have managed to put in a commercial building. The residential went up, and then the weeds started growing, and nothing's happened on those. And I fear that will continue to happen. And I'm not saying it will on this. I think their intent is a good one, and they have, if the Y follows through and does move into this building, then that would be great. It makes me nervous.
What makes you nervous about it?
I just don't want to see another building, another residential structure going up and not having the commercial follow.
I completely share that concern. I think that's the trend that we have seen, and it's now been a couple of years, and we're certainly in the middle of a crazy time right now with the COVID piece. But until then, it was a pretty vibrant economy. So I don't think that enough stress was being put on that commercial piece in general, the ones that are out there. And I think people have gotten maybe a little excited about land value when they try to sell the land because of what's happened around them. And the sticker prices on the land has gone up substantially, and construction costs have gone up, and that combination has probably made it not an attractive investment. And that's why I think the pieces that we just talked about have not gone anywhere, because the market in general has been strong.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks for leading that discussion, Gwen. That's good.
Molly Cowan has her hand up.
Molly.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about no picture. I am dealing with an unstable internet connection as well, and so it makes the internet better if I'm not on camera. But I just want to point out that in the TIF, the objective does include business opportunities, retail, office space, mixed residential housing opportunities, professional services, etc. And Aaron, I hear your point about being disappointed that the other parts of the TIF haven't been more fruitful. You know, I know we only have that one coffee place, Aroma Joe's, which is great, and I appreciate it there, but it's not sort of the booming residential piece, or I'm sorry, business piece that we were hoping for. But I also think that this project, if we can find a way to make it work in terms of the environmental impact, actually does meet the TIF requirements, as well as the vote to put in water and sewer.
if it gets built.
Right. So and it seems to me that it's not possible to say, yes, we can phase this in, or we can build it in phases. The financing piece isn't going to work like that. So I think, is that a strong enough argument to make sure that all of these pieces are built at the same time to ensure that we do have the mixed use here? And I don't know who that question is directed at. Maybe
I don't know what the question. Can you restate it, Molly? I'd try to field it.
Well, I mean, because I share your concern about if this business piece, if the pieces that are not purely residential are also built. So if we're talking about this mixed use compound, and what I heard from, I think it was maybe Thomas Leonard or Jim Petropoulos earlier, was the financing piece doesn't work if you build it in phases. So does that protect us here to ensure that we do get this mixed use?
I think the only way you can ensure it is to make it a condition of approval or make them bond it. And we have the legal right to make this requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. I also don't want to, I'm sorry, Molly. I don't know that this is what we need to dominate the conversation with the rest of the night, but it is definitely a big concern for me. And
no,
I'm happy and I'm happy that they're ready to go to the 48 again. So we just need to figure out how to ensure so that everybody's secure that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to also point out that piece about the TIF allowing for residential use and the pretty significant vote by the town. I can't remember what year it was because it's late, but to approve water and sewer out there.
Yeah. Well, Unitil has come on board as an example of the industrial portion of it, which I think is a nice addition to the community. And part of that plan, I mean, we had the water and sewer, so they're able to come along. Well, any other hands up, Dave?
John Gruder.
I was just going to ask Dave to give us guidance on how to get that done to ensure that the commercial is built.
Well, I have a suggested condition of approval that will do it. The applicant has expressed that that doesn't work for them, but I don't know of any other way. I mean, except, well, we talked about the two ways I know, and they didn't feel that either one would work for either one of them would work, either putting up funding for the commercial building in escrow or some type of irrevocable letter of credit to make sure it gets built, or tie it to a building permit or a CO for the residential component. And that's the only two ways I see that you're going to guarantee to ensure it gets built. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
It's not the answer he wants.
No, that's not the answer the applicant wants.
Yeah, right.
It's a fine answer if that's what it takes.
Well,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Maybe I'd recommend, if you have any other questions of the applicant, ask them, but then I would close the public hearing and go into deliberations.
Yep. So are there any other questions? Are there any hands up?
Pete Steckler has his hand up.
Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going to make one more comment about the conditional use permit for the Wetlands Overlay District. And, you know, I think it's my opinion that if the board approves this conditional use permit, it sets a precedent that undermines the protections afforded to the Wetland Overlay District for similarly extensive projects and smaller projects. It's hard for me to imagine a smaller project, you know, us being able to say no to a smaller project or move the needle on that based on the extensive impacts associated with this project. So just wanted to put my opinion out there on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there are no other questions, I'll close the public session at this point, and we'll bring the deliberations to the board. Do you want to start dealing with some waivers, or, because that's really where we're at. Do we have the information we have to make our decision?
So I know, I think Jennifer commented, I'm sorry, Lang, about concern about the traffic study. I share that as well. The scope of this project feels a little incomplete without that, to be starting to vote on things that could change. If those egresses change, that could have a ripple effect on a waiver we've already granted.
Good point.
John, do you have a question, comment?
No, I think Aaron makes a valid point. We may have to revisit it if something changes.
Gwen has her hand up.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, and I need to dig through my paperwork to find the waiver request, but at one point we did talk about the impact fee, and I think that might be one we could talk about, and I have some thoughts on that. The recreational impact fee.
Okay. I'm with you. I got to dig through my paperwork here to find that was the last time, I think.
And my comment is, I remember, and I even made a note of it, I think it was at last year's one of the town meetings that we had, and Greg Bisson got up and spoke about recreational needs in the community. And he basically said that residents and developments and housing in Exeter with on-site recreation say that this isn't enough. They want leaders to plan and organize activities. And kind of went on to say something to the effect of new residents are always looking for the town to do recreational activities, including at the senior center, through recreational trips, or at playgrounds and parks. And I know we've had this discussion with other projects, and whether the on-site facilities are adequate, and whether we feel that we can waive the impact fees for that or not. But I can't ignore what Greg said, and I think that's worth a discussion from the board.
I agree. We have looks like a 20 by 40 pool and a small playground. And I think we confirmed tonight that we really don't have access to the conservation land for recreational purposes. So I'm not in favor of any waiver on any rec fees.
And if you're looking through your packet, there's a couple of different waiver letters. It says it's a letter with the letterhead WWF on the top from Welch, White, and Fontaine, attorneys at law, and it's dated May 11th, 2020. You mentioned have to dig it out. That talks about the recreational space waiver and the recreational impact fee waiver.
And just to elaborate a little bit on what John just said, I mean, the pool is wonderful to have and it's great for the summer, but we've got the rest of the year, and that's kind of when people are really kind of desperate to find activities. And as I said, whether it's through trips or events that may be indoors, but I think we can't ignore those needs of people who will be moving into these units.
Aaron Brown and then Jen Martell has a hand up if Gwen's all.
Aaron?
I think it's page 18 on that packet. If you had it electronically, I did find it. I think we normally have the applicant read the waiver request into the record before we get too far into our discussion.
Yeah.
But I think Gwen's making a great suggestion, because this is a waiver that I don't think the circumstance is going to change as this project evolves. So it's good use of our time.
I do believe we had that discussion in the prior meeting, but I'll defer to the board. I mean, definitely have it in writing as well.
Well,
we did have a discussion. I know the applicant, and I don't want to speak for them, but I know they were concerned because this is there is a portion of this that's workforce housing, and it was a dollar impact for them if we didn't approve this. But we didn't come to any conclusions. We didn't have a large discussion about it.
Jen Martell has her hand up.
Jen?
I'm just trying to make sense of the waivers that are being requested, because I also have a letter dated 6/15 that we got in the previous packet that is site plan waiver request, but it does not include the impact fee.
Right.
So I thought maybe that they were no longer asking for that. I thought this was kind of like the most recent summary. It has like revision dates at the top. So do we have to look at both the cumulative of both that and the one with just the two recreation waiver requests? Is that correct?
Correct. I was clear as mud in my memo, but that's what I tried to articulate in that last paragraph about the waivers with the different dates. There are two waivers, the recreational impact fee waiver and the recreational space waiver that's under a separate letter.
Okay.
May 11th, 2020. And then another letter, November 19th, revised May 13th. Is another one. And then a second revision of the waiver request letter was submitted on June 16th. So we kind of have multiple iterations.
Got it. Thank you.
But it's suffice to say, I believe that I've captured all the waivers in my waiver motions.
I don't know, because I'm counting, there's 6.
Or maybe I did.
6/15 memo.
6/16 memo had six waivers on it.
And then there's 2 on the other one, but your comments only had 7.
6.
So I'm wondering if one is duplicated. So I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah.
What's the date we should be looking for on that document? You said June 15th?
June 15th.
I have a June 18th one.
We received it June 16th, but it's dated June 15th.
Revised June 15th.
Lang, can I ask the applicant a question?
Sure. Yes.
Are you asking for an impact waiver?
Yes.
Could you
I'm
address?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's hard with the speaking delay. I have a delay. Can you address your rationale as to why we should be in favor of that request succinctly?
Yes. So my letter of May 11 addresses the two different waivers. And I think I'm hearing you ask about the impact fee itself. Is that right?
That is correct. I'm looking at that letter. Yep.
Okay. So the impact fee waiver standard is in Article 11 of the zoning ordinance. And it's Article 11.7. And it specifically affords applicant the opportunity when they make a contribution in kind. And that's essentially what we have done is donate the back 40 acres. Now, I understand that part of it was toward mitigation, but it's in excess of what was required of mitigation. The value of the property, we had an appraisal, and I think it's been submitted to you. The appraisal was $1,855,000.
Yep, I remember reading that.
Our mitigation responsibility is in the vicinity of $600,000 or $700,000, so that there was $1,255,000 of value that's contributed to the public. And it's our argument and our position that this justifies waiver of the impact fee itself. Add to the fact that it is a workforce housing project. The state has encouraged towns to waive particular fees that add unnecessary cost in certain situations, and we think this is one of those situations. And the waiver standard under 11.7 supports it.
Ryan, can I speak?
Yes, please.
Attorney Leonard, so was the donating of this land part of the consideration in the variance argument?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, yes. we certainly considered that it was. And in fact, to be fair, and to tell you our intention all along was to contribute that, and we fully expected that it would be open to the public. What happened in the process, and we certainly respect the process, but you heard a little bit earlier the discussion about whether this particular property should be open to the public. So that became an issue. And but from the beginning, we always expected that extra 40 acres was public. We thought it would be connected to the trail system, and we understood that it was, toward the recreational effort of this community. One of the things we tried to do in the design of the project is not have recreation on site so that we could maximize the rear portion of the property that would be donated. So for example, if the board were to ask us to contribute 400 square feet, that's the other waiver, but contributing 400 square feet per unit, we would take it from the land that is getting donated to the public. So, there's a lot going on here, but I think you're exactly right. We understood that this was what we were doing in part. But we certainly accept that the Conservation Commission and this board should be the ones that decide how to handle and use their public property. So we understand that as well.
Yeah.
So I think Attorney Leonard makes a good argument almost of the dovetailing of those two waivers, the recreational space waiver motion and the impact fee waiver motion.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to lean towards granting the recreational space waiver motion, but not the impact fee. Only because I think that, I mean, it's my opinion that the value of the donation has been overstated, not by the applicant, but by a third party. And that there will be needs coming out of the community that will develop there. We're talking a lot of residents coming to the town that will put an impact on the town and the resources, and hopefully some of that money will go towards servicing them directly. But I don't think requiring them to have recreational spaces makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts? Pete Cameron, you're sitting there quietly thinking things over. You got some thoughts on this one?
The recreation space waiver amounts to how much land? Did someone say 400 square feet per unit?
If I could respond, Mr. Chairman, I believe that's correct. It is 400 feet per unit. I believe it's
400 times 220.
2.5 acres, a little over two, in between 2.5 acres.
Okay.
And there is no other green space for recreation. It's either a little small yard space or stormwater management, basically, right? Is that correct? There really isn't any other green space that you go out play catch with your son or something like that?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr.
Yes.
Gruder, there is a reasonable space just south of Building C that is just open area. Could be considered for some form of recreation once the apartment development is up and running.
Can you show that to us, Jim?
Yes,
Please.
okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, this area right here I was alluding to.
Right. So if you're a young kid in there, you really don't have a place to play, and you don't have easy access to a playground. You know, you're not going to be riding your bike down Epping Road, probably.
I hope not. Unless you're really fast.
Well, when you need all those sidewalks in line, it'll be good to go.
Yeah. But I mean, and not that you might need 2 acres, but some land would be nice.
You got 40-something acres of wetlands behind it, John.
Yeah, I know. Well, they teach them scuba diving then.
Aren't there some high spots out there?
Yeah, but I don't think the Conservation Commission wants us using it. I'm just saying that once this place is built, and I don't know who's going to own it and who's going to run it, but, you know, if there's absolutely just very limited, easily to access recreation green space, it's going to be, it's going to be a pain in the neck for someone.
Are you volunteering for that, John?
Volunteering for what? To create a green space?
Maintaining the conservation land?
Kristen Murphy has her hand up, and then Jen Martell. I guess we've reopened the public hearing, Lang, because we've allowed the attorney and the engineer to speak. So
okay,
we've reopened it. So
reopen the public hearing.
We're done. We'll close it again. Kristen Murphy has her hand up, and then Jen Martell.
Kristen.
Sorry, I hope I didn't cause that, but I did want to be clear and not. I hope that you realized the Conservation Commission was supportive of a trail on a portion of the conservation easement area or of the conservation land, following along that woods road. And it would be an out and back trail, but it's still a trail. It still provides some outdoor space.
So they, if I might ask you, Kristen, the Conservation Commission was thinking about recreation for the residents in that sidewalk that you guys did. Said, well, what could happen, but we got to be careful. There's a cat behind you.
There's a moth flying around here and she's going crazy. Sorry. But yes, the Conservation Commission was considering a portion of that available for recreation. What they didn't want to do was establish a, high traffic conservation area affiliated with that property because of the resources that are present.
Right.
And I did find the aerial, and I could show you if you want where that is, if it's worth it.
Sure, I'm for that. Picture's worth 1,000 words. We got 10 more minutes to listen.
I'm sorry, and I know it's a lot, but I know it's also an important issue. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
So this is the development. You can see it here in black. Right. This is the conservation and mitigation land. There is a woods road that goes right up in this area and continues almost to the confluence of Bloody Brook, which is off in this area. So there is a decent amount of trail space out there that can happen without significant impacts to the resource.
Does that require, or would that require any, any work, for lack of a better term, to have it, a safe, healthy trail? If I make this, we don't want bikes, I understand that, but just a nice walking trail.
Yes, it would require some work, and the memo from the Conservation Commission sent, the June memo, does propose a condition that they requested you consider when that includes trail design and involvement of the Conservation Commission in that role. They also felt that it wasn't a significant burden to the applicant because it's a woods road. So very little effort would have to happen to make it usable.
We're not developing a new trail, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I for one would give that some consideration.
So Lang, do we want to get back to one of these waivers specifically and see if we can actually get a vote done?
We only got about 8 minutes. I'm not sure we have the time to do that. I think we need some thinking time about this trail, and as does the developer. I think that we ought to look at that, maybe, the conservation memo on that as somewhere to stretch the legs and do the somersaults or whatever it's going on.
I do have that as recommended by the commission about the trail.
Yeah. So I think what I should do is probably close the public session, then we should continue this meeting at date certain and pick up the.
John Gruder has his hand up.
John, yes.
Just David, we're going to concentrate on these two motions first, and I know we're not going to vote tonight, but on the impact fee motion, can we adjust it so we might give a 25% reduction on the impact fees based on the fact that 25% of those units are workforce housing? Is that doable?
I think I don't know if you should specify or call out that, the workforce housing. I'm not sure what the difference is as far as.
But that would be my justification.
The point is yes, you can. I mean, it's been.
You're off, Dave. Your speaker's not on. Your microphone, I mean.
Oop, I'm sorry. I was holding down the space bar, but it wasn't working.
I don't necessarily mean to phrase it that way. That's why.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, applicants have routinely asked for a percentage of the impact fee being waived.
Right.
Past, and the planning board in the past has adjusted that when they've asked for something. They've adjusted the percentage based on what they felt was a fair amount to be requested for. So yes, you are free to, I think adjust that. I think the applicant would rather have it adjusted than an outright no based on what they're requesting. If that's, if that's what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that with, completing access to that old road would be helpful.
Yeah. That's something to look at.
Okay, so we need a motion to continue this hearing, right?
Yep. Please. Let me close the public session so that we are right in deliberations next time we meet. So I'll do that. Public session's closed again. And what you got for motion? How are we looking at the next meeting?
Well, you had already set aside the August 13th was for CIP.
We're going to start at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, this meeting tonight wasn't even going to happen. You usually take it off, but you agreed to think. But we talked about it, and you said August 13th was for as many applications as I can fit new applications on. So we have 13, I think, now pending planning board applications. So the next agenda would be the August 27th that you tabled the Grisette yield plan to.
Yeah. We get the reverse.
Unless, of course, you came up with a different, but that's the next regularly scheduled meeting.
So you got cases all lined up for the 13th, Dave?
I do.
Okay. We asked you to do that, so that's good.
Pete's got his hand up, physically.
Okay.
It seems to me that our progress tonight has been glacial. I know I've not said very much, but I just think we need is another meeting. Now, this is easy for me to say because I'm retired and I don't have to worry about a whole lot of things. But if we spend another night and we are not even to the waivers yet on this, it does seem to me that we've got a backlog. And David mentioned it before. And those folks have been very patient. But they're not getting anything done on their applications. David, how many do we have backed up? You gave me a number, but I forgot it.
Well, I counted them. I think we have 13 site plan. We have 13 site plan or, not site plan, planning board applications. There's a few minor subdivisions. There's a few site plans. There's a field modification request. There's a few different things. These two that we've discussed tonight are included in the 13. So we have 11 that haven't, have been submitted since February. I mean, they've all been like February, some were submitted in March, some submitted in April, some submitted in May. But now we have 11 beyond these two that we have not even been able to put on an agenda.
And in all fairness, it seems to me we have to get to those people. Maybe their projects are small, but nonetheless, they are their projects. And I guess I'm not sure, other than a special meeting where that's all we did. We would not consider Gateway, and we would not consider Grisey, and then we would just focus on the backlog. We did this, remember, we had minutes that were jammed up, something fearful at one point. And it just seems to me that somehow, in all fairness to those others, we've got to get to them.
Well, Pete, are you suggesting that we consider a special meeting?
I'm sorry,
are you suggesting we schedule a special meeting?
I'm suggesting that we have a special meeting which focuses only on the backlog, nothing else.
Here's my
backlog in order in which it was started.
Yep. Here's my thought. We already have several scheduled for the 13th of August. Maybe we do a special meeting on the 20th for Gateway. Get them wrapped up on the 20th. And then we got Reset coming in on the 27th, and I'm not sure if there's any other schedule on that yet, Dave. But
well, it would be this one.
It would be this one, yeah.
You'd table this till the 27th. I mean, that'd be tough, though. I mean, you got to recognize that they had asked earlier. They were first on the agenda, and so was Gateway, because they were split apart.
Yes.
When we first started. Now that they're lumped together, you can't guarantee if you put them both on the same agenda, you're going to get to the other, like was
the case tonight. Yeah.
Like was the case tonight. So, hopefully, if you put them on the same agenda, you might want to start it. I don't know. Well, no, you can't start it. You've already tabled to a date certain and 7 p.m. earlier. So you just want to kind of make sure, you can get to them both.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to balance out here. Yeah.
John, do you still have your hand up just as a leftover, or do you have something new to say?
Yeah, got a solution to the problem.
No, he doesn't have a solution.
Oh, darn. All right.
Well, is it what's our notice requirement for a special meeting?
Well, it's about 2.5 weeks because you have to notify abutters within 10 days.
So it's not like we could just continue this next Thursday night.
Oh no, for this one, yeah, this one you could continue. You need, just I think 24 hours really, but
will we have all the info on the traffic study?
This one, we're having the scoping meeting on Thursday, the 30th.
So you won't have it.
Yeah. Well, we could go on the 7th of August.
You could do the 7th.
Excuse me, 6th of August.
6th of August.
You could do the 7th, yeah. I mean, it still doesn't solve the backlog, but that at least to try to get through a couple of these, like I see these as like the cow and the snake. And as soon as those get out, there's some minor subdivisions that are,
yeah, right.
Pretty straightforward. and smaller projects. So we could figure that out, but that would be good if you could do August 7th for this.
No, 6th.
It's the 6th.
Or
David.
6th, sorry. Yeah.
Misread the calendar. Seemed to me you have to be the 6th or the 20th.
Does that work for the applicant? Can you nod your head, Tom, or? Yeah, okay. I didn't know if they, didn't want to be out of town or anything. So it said, they say it works for the August 6th.
What about the parking?
What about the parking? What do you mean?
Is we're going to have the additional information from Steve Perna?
Well, traffic.
We have
That's what I meant, traffic.
We have our DOT scoping meeting on August 30th. And I think after that meeting, I'll definitely have a lot more information than I do now.
Wait a minute. The scoping meeting's on July 30th, right?
July 30th, yes.
You said August. That's good.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think anything's going to be, that's just a scoping meeting, but I'll know more than I do now. That's for sure.
Yeah, because we still have the problem of traffic. And I don't think we've really solved that yet. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, that's the point of trying to give some more time before the meeting. But I think we should go August 6th.
I'd like to chime in on August 6th. That's actually the date of a pretty important Exeter schools meeting, I think, regarding the return to school. So I think a lot of parents in Exeter are going to want to be attending that on August 6th.
Well, what about August 20th? That's good time for the scoping meeting and a re-meeting scoping meeting. I don't know what scoping meetings are like.
I like August 20th.
For me,
20th works.
20th. Yeah.
All right.
How about Mr. Monahan? Would that work? Yep.
Okay.
He said because you're not giving him conditional approval tonight.
No.
Come back on the 20th.
Yeah, we haven't got to the waivers yet.
Okay, how about a motion, Aaron?
Okay, I'll make a motion. I make a motion to continue the planning board case number 19-15 and case 19-16 Gateway at Exeter until August 20th at 7 o'clock.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Okay, let's see. Jen, how will you vote?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Gwen?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
And Molly?
Yes.
I vote yes. So be it. Special meeting for Gateway.
August 20th.
August 20th, 7 o'clock.
Thank you very much.
Comfort of your homes and offices.
Thank you very much.
We
Appreciate all your help.
Discussion's been ended, so it will be right in deliberations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see, what else we got for business on this agenda here? Oh, I don't see any other business, Dave, that you have? No?
I do not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Well, excuse me.
Pete?
If we're gonna get to waivers, it seems to me that I've got at least three different sets of waiver requests here.
Yes.
Is it possible to get to all of us the most current so that we're all we're all on the same page?
I will make sure I address that in my memo and resend everything so it's as easy as to understand as possible.
Yeah, and keep all the waivers together. Yep. Thank you, Pete. Will do. All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you so much. Until next
Did
time.
you need a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, sure. Give me a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
All right, moved and second, and consensus on this one. Those in favor?